Close your eyes. Feel the suffocating heat pressing down on your chest. Jerusalem, year 33. The midday sun is crushing the white limestone slabs with a ruthless violence. The air is thick with the sour stench of sweat, the smell of animal dung, and the pungent smoke of baking unleavened bread, mixing with burning incense. You always thought Palm Sunday was a glorious parade covered in rose petals, exactly like those pristine Renaissance paintings. They lied to you. The historical reality is far more brutal and grimy. It was a pressure cooker of chaos, political schemes, and a tragedy waiting to explode. Have you ever stood in the middle of a crowd cheering your name, surrounded by colleagues or even family? But deep down, you felt a chilling isolation. You realize that applause is not for who you truly are. They cheer for what you can provide: money, protection, security, the exhausting sacrifice of a man who must carry the weight of an entire family on his shoulders. If you have ever felt that suffocating burden, if you have ever found yourself walking a path surrounded by fake applause while your soul is bleeding, listen closely. This historical moment was written exactly for you. The city of Jerusalem during the Passover week was not a peaceful sanctuary. It was a massive matrix. The normal population was around 25 to 30,000 people, but during those days, it grotesquely swelled, packing in between 100,000 and 200,000 additional pilgrims from every corner of the Roman Empire. These were men who had walked over 130 kilometers from Galilee, sleeping under the stars, all physically exhausted, cramped, exploited, boiling with extreme frustration under the iron heel of the expeditionary forces. They sang the 15 Psalms of Ascent as they climbed towards the city, clinging to a desperate hope. And over there, dominating the entire skyline, was Herod's temple, a gigantic machine of power built with blocks of stone weighing dozens of tons, some stretching over 13 meters in length. It glittered with white marble and pure gold under the spring sun. Magnificent, imposing. But what was inside it? It was a ruthless commercial center where the priests colluded with the authorities to drain every last copper coin from the miserable commoners. That was not the house of God. It was a dogmatic prison, disguised by a majestic exterior. But amidst that thick air of deception, an event was quietly taking place, cutting human history into two eternal halves. The Messiah did not enter this city on a whim. He was not swept up by the emotions of the crowd. His entry was a mathematical code programmed with terrifying precision. 500 years earlier, the prophet Zechariah had written a code that the true king would not ride a war horse nor march with armed legions. He would arrive humbly on the back of a young donkey colt that no one had ever tamed. And even more horrifyingly accurate, the prophet Daniel had provided an undeniable timeline. 69 weeks of years, exactly 483 years from the decree of the Persian king Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem until the appearance of the Messiah Prince. Not a single day off. On that exact day, the 10th of Nisan in the year 33, all the cosmic countdown reached its final beat. When he appeared on the slopes of the Mount of Olives, the crowd went mad. They cut palm branches, a symbol of extreme nationalism and political victory, and threw them on the road along with their cloaks. They screamed, "Hosanna, save us now." They wanted a general. They wanted Roman blood to spill. They wanted a political overthrow to satisfy their greed and worldly resentment. He looked at them. He saw right through the souls that were screaming his praises, souls that were actually preparing to crucify him just a few days later. And right at the absolute peak of that fake glory, amidst the cheers echoing across the earth, he did something that left his disciples stunned. He did not smile. He did not wave. The creator of the universe broke down and wept. Not a quiet, dignified tear. It was a visceral, sobbing cry tearing from the depths of his understanding of human tragedy. Why would the one holding all power weep during his own coronation? What cruel secret did he see behind those glittering walls of gold? A secret the system has deliberately obscured in their sermons for 2,000 years. That single tear hides an activation code capable of shattering every dogma you have ever believed. The contrast between the weeping of the Lord and the shouts of Hosanna from the crowd is one of the most powerful in the entire biblical narrative. The Greek text uses the verb eklein to describe this moment. It signifies a deep weeping, a weeping with sobs. It was not a discreet tear shed in quiet dignity. It was a visceral and genuine expression of pain. While the multitude celebrated, he wept. While the people sang of victory, he saw the tragedy that was approaching. Look closely at the anatomy of that crowd. They were agitated with an expectation that no previous generation had known with such intensity. They waved branches of palm trees, a deeply political symbol of triumph and national victory, but their Hosanna was not a spiritual awakening. It was a demand. They were shouting for a conquering Messiah who would expel the Romans. They wanted a military general to slaughter their oppressors, to restore their worldly economy, to fix their immediate physical problems. They did not want a savior for their souls. They wanted a utility. They wanted a tool to exact their revenge. He looked at them, and he spoke to the city as if it were a beloved person making a fatal decision. He saw right through the illusion of their praises. He knew that his conquest was going to be of a completely different nature, far more profound and costly than any military victory. He knew that, because they failed to recognize the time of their visitation, a horrifying fate awaited them. He saw the future with terrifying clarity. He knew that in less than 40 years, exactly what he predicted would happen. The Roman legions under the command of Titus would surround Jerusalem in the year 70. They would demolish the magnificent temple to its very foundations. They would leave not one stone upon another, exactly as he warned. The suffering of the city would be of a magnitude that ancient historians would describe with absolute horror. He knew it. He saw it. And it hurt him with an intensity that did not fit into words but only into tears. Now think about your own life. Think about the isolation of the provider. You sit in your car in the driveway after a grueling 10-hour shift. Your hands are calloused, your mind is numb, and your chest is tight with the suffocating anxiety of mounting debts and medical bills. Inside that house are people who rely on you. They look at you and they see a shield. They demand your strength, your provision, your endless capacity to fix their problems. They want the results you bring, just like the crowd wanted the military conquest from the Messiah. But they do not see the man breaking under the weight. They do not understand the silent tragedy you carry, the fear of the impending collapse you are desperately trying to hold back. You are surrounded by people, yet you are utterly alone in your agony. That is the exact solitude he felt on the Mount of Olives. This moment reveals something essential about his character. His love is not a surface love of pretty words and grandiose gestures. It is a love that hurts. It is a love that weeps for those who reject him. A love that does not abandon even when abandonment is the response he receives. The same Jesus who wept for Jerusalem knows your name and knows your history. His love for you has that same depth that does not fit into ordinary language. When you feel that agonizing separation, when you realize that the institutions and the people you bleed for only value your utility, remember his lonely tear. Your pain is entirely understood. You are not a failure. You are bearing the reflection of that exact moment of divine sorrow. As the procession finally entered the city through the gate leading to the Temple Mount, the effect was seismic. The entire city shuddered. The Greek verb used is isiista, related to the word for earthquake. It was a collective shock, an entire city shaken by the question floating in the thick, dusty air. Who is this? He did not go to the palace of Herod. He did not go to the residence of the high priest or the Roman praetorium. He went directly to the temple. Because the temple was the heart of Israel, the place where heaven and earth met. But the tragedy of his tears was about to manifest into physical reality. He was stepping into the core of the religious matrix. He was about to confront a system that considered itself the guardian of life, but was actually leading the people toward spiritual death. What he found inside those sacred walls would scandalize the religious leaders forever. It was an action that would seal his fate and expose the ultimate deception of the institution. You need to prepare yourself, because what happens next in the court of the Gentiles is not just a historical event. It is the exact blueprint for destroying the dogmatic prison that has been built inside your own mind. He walked through the massive gates of the temple. The stench of animal sweat and burning incense hit him like a physical blow. This was the court of the Gentiles, the only place where the outcast could seek the divine. But the system had turned it into a slaughterhouse of commerce. Listen to the deafening noise, the frantic bleating of sheep, the cold clinking of Roman coins being exchanged for temple currency. The elite priests were taxing the poor for the right to speak to the Creator. It was a perfectly designed matrix of spiritual extortion. They demanded the half-shekel temple tax. They sold supposedly pure doves at exorbitant prices to men whose hands were bleeding from hard labor. Men just like you. Men who had dragged their exhausted bodies for miles just to be told they were not worthy unless they paid the fee. He did not politely ask them to leave. He did not negotiate with the establishment. He flipped the tables of the money changers. Silver coins scattered across the limestone floor like worthless pebbles. He drove out the merchants. You have been taught this was a momentary lapse of control, a burst of human anger. They lied. This was a cold, calculated, and prophetic dismantling of a rotten religious matrix. He was declaring sovereignty over the sacred space. He was reclaiming what belonged to the divine from the parasites who monetized guilt and fear. He looked at the priests and told them they had turned a house of prayer into a den of thieves. But there is a deeper layer to this moment, a code hidden in plain sight that the system never wanted you to decipher. Why did he enter the city and the temple on that exact day? The 10th day of the month of Nisan. To understand this, you must look at the ancient texts, the instructions for the Passover lamb. The ancient law dictated that the lamb must be separated from the flock on the 10th day of Nisan. It had to be strictly examined for 4 days to ensure it had no blemishes, no defects. Only then could it be sacrificed. When he rode down the Mount of Olives and entered the temple on the 10th of Nisan, the true Passover lamb was presenting himself for inspection. For the next 4 days, he remained in Jerusalem. He was interrogated by the Pharisees. He was questioned by the Sadducees. He was examined by the Herodians, by the high priest, and finally by the Roman governor. They tested him relentlessly. They tried to trap him in his words, but they could find no fault, no blemish, no defect. The involuntary testimony of his enemies perfectly aligned with the ancient sacrificial law. And exactly 4 days later, at the precise hour the priests were slaughtering the lambs in the temple courts, he was offered up on the cross. Every single detail was a shadow cast forward by the reality of his purpose. The mathematics of the universe were aligning perfectly. Now take a deep breath and bring your focus away from the dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem and look at your own hands. Look at your own life. You have spent decades striving. You have carried the heavy yoke of the American dream. You have sat in magnificent buildings waiting for a silent sky to answer your prayers. You have paid your tithes, followed their rules, and yet you still feel the agonizing weight of exhaustion in your bones. The medical bills pile up on the kitchen table. The distance between you and your children grows wider every year. You feel the crushing loneliness of a provider who is only valued for what he can produce. Why is the sky silent amidst this struggle? Because you have been looking in the wrong direction. The ultimate secret of the overturned tables is not about a physical building of stone and gold. The true temple is not in Jerusalem. It is not down the street with a steeple on top. The true temple is your own body. The sacred architecture is within your own mind. The money changers are still operating today, but they are operating inside your consciousness. They are the dogmas of fear. They are the voices of the system telling you that you are a sinner, that you are unworthy, that you need a mediator, a priest, or an institution to connect with the divine. They are the religious matrix that taxes your spiritual energy and keeps you docile. It is time for you to flip the tables in your own mind. It is time to drive out the merchants of guilt, the power that orchestrated the universe, the power that fulfilled ancient prophecies to the exact day, is the same power that resides in your very veins. You do not need their permission to access the divine. You hold the authority of a sovereign soul. The entry into Jerusalem was not just a historical event. It was the blueprint for your own inner awakening. The code has been given to you. If you can feel the heavy chains of the system breaking right now, if you recognize the sovereign authority that has always belonged to you, leave the words "I have awakened" in the comments below. Seal this truth for yourself. Let the system know that their matrix can no longer hold you. You are part of the remnant. The isolated fathers, the tired workers, the men who have decided to stop seeking the divine in cold stone and start recognizing it in their own pulse. Share this message with another soul who is wandering in the dark. Unsubscribe to join the circle of those who are reclaiming their spiritual heritage. May the true peace, the peace that requires no tribute and no mediator, govern your heart from this day forward. The light is always within you. See you again